One of the things to understand about shadow work, especially if you want to help other people get involved with it, is that most people don't want true healing or freedom. This is one of the sad and unfortunate realities of our world and our civilization, our species, but unfortunately it is true. Sadly, most human beings alive today do not want true healing or true freedom, for the very fact that both of those dynamics, real healing and real freedom, involve dynamics which were previously discussed: a change in life worldview, which they don't want to perform. They don't want to do that. They want to stay rigidly attached to their existing worldview. It requires deep personal responsibility, and it involves incredibly hard work and profound personal sacrifice. And people want no parts of those things. They're stuck in the worldview that says, I want to maximize my comfort and pleasure, and I can't be bothered with any of those other dynamics in life. That's for someone else to do, not me. And as long as the human species stays in that mind frame, in that mindset, don't expect freedom. Don't expect healing. Don't expect anything good. There's going to be suffering and death and slavery, and that's it. So human beings must understand that the human condition will only get worse and worse and worse until humanity embraces the cold hard fact that these dynamics are exactly what real world positive change requires. A profound change in worldview, deep personal responsibility, hard work, and profound personal sacrifice. If people are not willing to do those things, do not expect any difference in what is manifesting in our lives. It will only get worse and worse. One of the other dynamics and concepts to understand is that when we are engaging in shadow work, it is akin to and similar to a death process. As strange as that may sound, we are actually letting go and allowing to die bad habits, bad aspects of the personality. And that form of growth can feel like death. So spiritual growth through shadow work may often feel like death to those engaging in it. This is because their former self was attached to wrong and illusory ideas and habits. Their entire identity was built upon that shaky foundation and that elusive perception of reality. So when they begin to change for the better, they begin to perceive their old identity as quote unquote dying. Many people have experienced and reported this when they undergo real shadow work. In reality, their old mental selves are finally relinquishing illusion and growing to become something new and better than the old version of themselves. It is not actually death, but a form of self-renewal, such as a caterpillar becoming a butterfly in the cocoon and in the transformative process that it undergoes, seemingly into a different being. So we have to understand that the processes of shadow work are so powerful and so potentially destructive to the illusory reality that one is living, that they literally can feel like death. People can become depressed. People can become overwhelmed. That's why you have to set the framework to do this type of work by first deeply understanding the concepts which we have been laying out. We haven't gotten to methodology yet. We're still exploring the concepts of shadow work and what it entails before we ever get to actual methodologies, which are coming. The concept of a little learning can be a dangerous thing, also needs to be deeply understood when it comes to shadow work. Where this comes from is in Greek mythology. The so-called Pierian spring was a metaphorical source of knowledge, popularized in Alexander Pope's poem called An Essay on Criticism. Pope wrote, quote, "A little learning is a dangerous thing. Drink deep, or taste not the Pierian spring. There shallow draughts intoxicate the brain, and drinking largely sobers us again." So he's saying, metaphorically, that if you drink from the fountain of knowledge, if you are going to take knowledge into yourself, you have to take it in deeply and as completely as possible through the trivium method. people look into knowledge in a cursory form, in a very tiny fraction of what they should be researching and gathering and taking into themselves. And then what happens is they become drunk with that little bit of knowledge. It's like drinking a very, very tiny portion of alcohol and getting completely annihilated versus drinking 10 cases of beer and barely feeling any effect. And that's because this has a reverse effect. When you take in only a little bit of knowledge, you think you know things. And you think you are the shit and you have it all figured out. And that's where most of the freedom movement is. They've learned a tiny, tiny little bit, and now they think their shit doesn't stink, and they think that they know everything that they need to know when they basically know absolutely nothing. And then they don't want to listen to people who have learned largely the things they really, truly need to know. And they want to dismiss those people, and they don't even want to give them a platform to speak. So it's really insane and sad what is happening with the freedom community, and this is very indicative of it. So again, this means that when pursuing an undertaking that involves a deep dive into knowledge, such as shadow work, we should learn as much as possible, as much as we can, before claiming to have enough information. And I have enough information. See, that's the thing. It's like people don't really want to hear that from the people who actually have gathered the grammar and done the homework. You know, they think it's all the same. No, you don't understand the amount of knowledge I've taken in. It's so colossal. It's scary to even me. I look at what I've taken in and I'm like, this is inhuman. This is like almost preternatural. It's almost robotic. It's like I was some kind of a computer program just ingesting data. And it's so much, you'd almost pass out, right? So when you tell people that who haven't done that process, they're very hesitant to even grasp it, let alone really understand it. Most people do not delve deeply enough into necessary information, yet they think they know enough to attain the results which they seek. And that's only going to come with enough information. The other thing people get wrong when it comes to shadow work is what human nature actually is. And this is a crux of my work and a crux of understanding shadow work. If you don't understand this, you are not going to grasp even my work or certainly not shadow work. And this is what human nature actually is, and 99.99999% of human beings have it completely incorrect when it comes to what human nature is. And here's what it is, factually, objectively, definitely, truthfully, and 100% accurate. This is the actual nature of a human being is what I'm about to say. The true nature of human beings is that they are a programmable species, similar to, but not exactly the same as, computers. They are not just biological computers, but they have similar qualities to computers in a biological capacity. We are a programmable species, just like a computer can be programmed. Like a computer, if a human being has bad formatting, the format on the drive, the conditions during a child's formative years. If they have a bad operating system, which is the culture that you grow up in and all the programming that comes along with that culture. If a person has bad software programs, like we're seeing with Telegram today, unfortunately, which the false software programs that are instilled in their noggin are false, rigid, and dogmatic belief systems. Then what's going to happen with their behavior? Their output, which is their behavior, onto the so-called screen, which is life, and the field of consciousness, which we all inhabit. Their output is going to be bad. Their behavior is going to be bad. And then what will happen? That will contribute to the deteriorating human condition on a mass scale. Again, as human beings degrade, freedom degrades. The human condition degrades. As human beings improve and become more moral, freedom increases. That's the law of freedom under natural law. Like a computer, the behavior of a human being will largely depend upon its programming, the quality of the information put into it, which enables it, through our minds, to process and create effectively and efficiently. Human beings are not bad by our nature. Human beings are not good by our nature. Human beings are a programmable species. So if garbage goes into the mind, garbage comes out through behavior. If quality goes into the mind, quality comes out through behavior. If garbage goes in and garbage comes out, the human condition is horrendous. If quality goes in and quality comes out through behavior, the human condition is improved. That's how human nature is and works, ladies and gentlemen. And if you don't think so, you're wrong. And that's the problem. That's part of the worldview healing that needs to take place, is you and the rest of the world need to fully grok what the true nature of humanity is as a programmable species. Get as offended as you want. It'll never make what I have here on the slide or what I have said untrue. We have to understand the schism of the worldview in order to conduct and be successful at shadow work. And this schism is between randomness and determinism. And the truth is that the healed worldview takes in some of both of these components, but doesn't stay in a state of extremity toward either one. The left brain randomness worldview is that the universe is some grand cosmic accident and matter is everything, and there's no creator, there's no underlying intelligence in all of nature. Nature hasn't constructed any laws to deal with behavior. It's just a mechanized clockwork of dead matter, right? There's no such thing as spiritual, moral law or natural law. Existence has no purpose other than survival or to continue to exist just for the sake of it. And these are all the hallmarks of scientism, atheism, and totalitarianism. And that's the randomness worldview. Everything is chaos. And then you have the deterministic worldview. This is a religious worldview in many instances. God controls every event in creation. Nothing happens without God's approval and all-knowingness. All occurrences are preordained by the Creator. Free will is an illusion because the Creator is conducting it all. Since God controls everything, change is impossible because how could we change anything? God's doing it all. And action, therefore, becomes ultimately meaningless and everything rests on faith and belief. These are the hallmarks of imbecilic religious extremism and slave think, because slaves think that, oh, their condition is just determined. How many people go, oh, there's nothing I can do about it. It just is that way. No, it's not. It's a choice. It always is a choice. Free will exists in every instant of reality. The truth that sits between these two worldviews has some components of both, is that there is a deterministic component of reality that has to be encompassed in our worldview, and that's natural law. And then there's a random component, which is free will. And they play with each other. They play dynamically against each other, and we have to align the two. We have to align our free will with the deterministic component of natural law, and that defeats self-inflicted suffering and grants us what we say we want, which is prosperity and freedom and, all better things for ourselves. Brain hemisphere imbalance always leads to one of these deep life worldview schisms. Left brain usually leads to randomness, right brain usually leads to determinism. If we're dwelling in left or right brain modalities all the time and there's no balance between those two dynamics in the mind. This schism is inseparably connected with an individual's view of human nature and free will to create positive change. Again, that's why I say worldview healing must come first. Nothing can happen without it. Most people end up believing in one of these two states of schism or brain imbalance in the completely incorrect ideas that either God or genetics control everything, and that free will is either an illusion or doesn't matter in any meaningful capacity. So once again, when you dwell in these states of brain imbalance and you're not healing your brain and your mind, which comes along with healing the body, the worldview, and the body, you either believe that God controls everything or genetics control everything, and therefore free will really has no place in anything. And that is a complete crock of bullshit worldview. That's why I call it the worldview schism. It fractures the individual. Shadow work must be utilized to repair this worldview schism, such that the individual comes to deeply understand that natural law and free will are the dynamics with which we simultaneously interact to collectively co-create the reality in which we live on a continual basis. Once again, this should be common knowledge, folks. This should not be some revelatory thing that Mark Passio is telling the world. We should all know this by now. This should be common, everyday common sense knowledge for the average person, but unfortunately it's not, because of religion, because of science, because of government, because of media, because of schooling, because of just trash brain damage that is being done to people through poisoning through chemicals, poisoning through bad information. Once again, garbage goes in, garbage comes out. And that's why we have the trash that's coming out through behavior in the world today and the destruction of our freedoms. We have free will to change our programming. That absolutely exists. And we need to know that that exists. We can control our own programming by deciding what information we take into ourselves and then really, truly knowing it and acting upon it. The worldview schism is ultimately about keeping people from the acceptance of free will and its power to create change. And that's what shadow work is all about. Many people do not want to heal their worldview schism. They want to continue to believe in deterministic ideas which disempower both themselves and other human beings. This is largely because they do not want to accept the personal responsibility that goes hand in hand with such empowerment through knowledge. They also subconsciously understand that such personal empowerment involves tremendously hard work, which most people are still too lazy to undertake. One of the things that has to readily be understood in shadow work is to never, ever, ever normalize pathology. This is one of the critical dynamics and concepts that needs to be understood when even beginning an undertaking in shadow work. You cannot normalize illness. Illness is not normal. So don't attempt to normalize it. Recognize when there's illness and recognize what real health is. And this is the problem, is that most people don't know what health is in today's modern society. They have no clue what health is. They're completely clueless when it comes to what is a healthy condition versus what is an unhealthy and illness-ridden condition. In the realm of shadow work, illness and disease must always be recognized for what they are, the absence of health and homeostasis through an imbalance of some kind. One should never attempt to normalize any form of pathology, disease, or illness, but instead should work to improve, heal, or mitigate such states to the extent that it is possible to do so. We are not promising perfect healing through shadow work. No one is promising that. Maybe some people are, but they're charlatans. There is no perfect healing, as I will describe later. There is betterment. There is improvement to the extent that it is possible to improve and heal. Nothing is perfect. If you expect perfection, you expect what never was, what is not now, and what never will be, and you'll be sorely disappointed forever. We're going to talk about perfection being an illusion. But progress, growth, healing, to the extent that they are possible, those are real and those are possible. Sadly, we are becoming a society that is laden with all sorts of psychological, pathological disorders, diseases of the mind, diseases of the psyche. Yet the bulk of our society is attempting, actively, right now, attempting to normalize such psychological imbalances. Instead of trying to heal them, they're trying to normalize them and saying this is just a condition of just how people are. No, it's not. It's a disease. It's pathology. It can be improved. It can be helped. It can be healed to certain extents, to very large extents in many cases. And they are attempting, our society today and the people who run it are attempting to normalize such pathological, psychological imbalances, even to the extent that they berate and ostracize the healthy individuals to make those who are ill feel better about themselves. They want the diseased, the ill, the psychologically unhealthy to feel okay about their condition of illness while demonizing and ostracizing the psychologically healthy that are saying, no, this isn't a normal condition. It should never be treated as normalcy. It needs to be helped to heal and improve, and we should never normalize bad mental health. Most of us lay somewhere in between these two states of good and bad mental health, but we should never allow pathology to be normalized. Illness is illness, and health is health. Never normalize mediocrity. This is another thing most people want to try to propagate in our modern society. We are not here on earth to be average. I hear this from so many people, and it's maddening. It's sad and maddening at the same time. I'm just poor little me. I'm just here to just do this little tiny thing or that little tiny thing or just nothing at all, or to just sit back and observe. You're weak. You're weak is the answer to that. You're here to do great things. You're not here to be some mediocre chump. We are not here on earth to be average, ladies and gentlemen. The perpetuation of mediocrity is exactly what has gotten humanity into its current condition of slavery. The truth is, we are here on earth to learn, to grow, and to self-actualize, which means to reach the highest level of self-potential of which we are capable, meaning to aspire to greatness and doing great things, not to be some normal, stupid chump. Unimaginably tremendous harm has been done to the psychology of human beings by those who have told them nonsense like this. That's not for you to do. You shouldn't set your goals so high, or you'll never achieve something so far-reaching. These aren't your friends. These aren't your family members. These aren't people who want good things for you. These aren't people who are trying to elevate you. That's how a bad person speaks to another person. Not a good person trying to elevate someone else higher. If you listen to people who say to you, that's not your work to do, you shouldn't set your goals so high. Oh, come down from your lofty pedestal. You're not going to do something that important. You know what you tell those people? Go fuck yourself. That's what you tell people like that. When you really conduct real shadow work, it helps you to realize exactly what those who have been telling you such self-limiting thoughts have actually been spreading. Complete bullshit. That's what they've been spreading to you, and that's what they want you to believe. We're not here to be mediocre. We're not here to be average. We're here to do great and amazing things. So don't normalize mediocrity any more than you should normalize pathology. Strive for excellence. Not perfection, but strive for excellence. The social engineers of our world want mediocrity and degradation. What do you think? They want people healthy, mentally, physically, spiritually? You think they want you to aspire to do wonderful things, great things? They want you to be some degraded moron. A society based upon mediocrity, immorality, ignorance, apathy, incompetence, laziness, and cowardice. In other words, human degradation is exactly what the dark occult social engineers thrive on. That's what they're trying to inspire in society and create everywhere, because people like that are very easy to control. Self-actualized, powerful individuals cannot be controlled. No way! They're going to tell you to go fuck yourself, and if you don't listen to that, they're going to fight you, because they're strong. They're not weaklings. Total human degradation is exactly what the social engineers need to keep people in line in order for their agenda of domination and slavery to continue. These social engineers cannot control or enslave a population that has transcended such conditions of degradation and mediocrity and self-actualized to their full potential as human beings. It's impossible to control that. And that's why they want to continue to propagate all the other nonsense that degrades human beings. And this is what shadow work helps us to work out of our personality to the extent that we are able to do so. It helps to purify the individual, not make them perfect, but make them better and make them strong. And stop listening to, oh, this isn't for you to do, you're not to do great things, you're just some mediocre schlub. No. We're here to self-actualize and attain our full potential as beings. Shadow work requires situational awareness, no different than in a situation where self-defense is required. Situational awareness applies to psychology as much as it does to physicality. Before even beginning shadow work, we must first develop a sense of situational awareness. This is the process of stop and look, orient yourself. I talk about stop and look constantly in the How to Become the True Media seminar. It's one of the core principles of how to become the true media. This is the process of orientation, to orient yourself with respect to the direction that you wish to go. It teaches us first to stop and look. This is the actual process here. This is not my slide. This is not my image that's displayed here. This is the actual process of situational awareness. Stop and look are the first two actions, the first two commands. Stop first. Don't do anything else. Look. Assess the situation and then manage the situation. This is what I did when I had a technical problem earlier. Didn't panic. Stopped what I was doing. Switched into what's the word I'm looking for? Not dynamics. Not schematics. I switched into troubleshooting mode, let's say. Okay. I just stayed calm, looked at what might be going on, assessed the situation, and then managed it by taking the correct course of action. So only when we first take assessment of our current orientation do we understand what action should then be done, what action should follow. You can't just start acting. You can't act on impulse with this stuff. You have to stop, look, and assess first. Then you act. Acting prior to situational awareness can often make the situation even worse, because we are putting action before understanding. In other words, we're putting our rhetoric before our grammar and logic in the trivium process. You never put the rhetoric or the action first. You have to first take in all the data, come to an accurate diagnostic, and that's the term I was searching for. I went into diagnostic mode. Do the necessary diagnostics to understand what the problem is and then act. That's the correct steps in the correct process, in the correct order. We have to stop sleepwalking, dreaming, and clinging to illusion. This is one of the maxims or dictates of the occult initiatory process. Stop dreaming. Stop sleepwalking. Stop doing things on autopilot, in other words. That's letting the so-called vicissitudes of culture just sway you in one direction or another, however the wind seems to be blowing. And if you're going to be a driven, self-learning, self-determining individual, you can't just go by those, swings in however culture wants to whip you in one direction or another. You have to stop sleepwalking, stopping just living on autopilot and just repetitive things that take you around in the same circle and keep you in the same mess. Shadow work requires seeing ourselves as we truly are and seeing the world as it truly is. This reflects the first maxim of occultism. Above all, be honest with yourself. Stop lying. And then the second one, to stop dreaming, is the second occult maxim. It calls us to come out of the state of comfortable illusion. Stop believing that good just automatically defeats evil. It does not. Stop believing that change is automatic. It is not. Stop sleepwalking through life on autopilot. Only conscious and aware people doing hard work upon themselves are going to make positive change happen. Instead of dreaming and sleepwalking, focus on competence and willpower to do the work that we must do to meet the requirements for bettering our world. That's when that process of change is going to dynamically flower and accelerate. That's why the imagery that I'm picking are people engaging in the imagination. They have vision. They can not just see what the future might be, if we make it that way, they can almost step into that reality and see how it would work. Tesla was one of these people with such a powerful imagination. So that's why I'm picking the type of imagery that I am for some of these slides. And we have to get out of the process of just floating through life on autopilot and doing whatever's just the most comfortable. That's not when we're doing great things. We do great things when we step out of the comfort zone and do what's required. You must put skin in the game. This is a concept and, a quote that's going to come up over and over again. You got to put skin in this game. One of the main purposes for doing shadow work at all is to assess your own commitment to the one great work of ending the condition of human slavery on this planet. And I keep coming back to that, folks. That's what this is all about. This isn't just making your life easier. This isn't just getting better at being the artist or the chef or the athlete or whatever. There's an agenda here, folks. If you haven't heard it yet, right? There's an agenda here. This seminar is not without an agenda. The agenda is we got to come out of slavery. And it all goes back to that. Okay? Your worldview has to heal. You got to learn the requirements. You got to meet the requirements through your willpower and take right action. And then we'll come out on the other side truly free beings, a free species capable of anything. And that's why I do this work. I want to see what our potential is. The difficult yet critical question that must be posed to the self is, how much effort have I put into changing hearts and minds? How about, first and foremost, my own? How much have I put into changing my mind and my heart? What I think and what I feel and what I care about? And then how much have you put into helping other people to change their hearts and minds? What has your effort been in that endeavor? How much skin do you have in that game? I venture to say most people have zero, or next to zero. It certainly isn't the amount of skin someone like myself has put into that game, quote unquote. It's not a game, by the way. That's just an expression. It's life and death reality. How much personal effort and sacrifice have you point the finger this way? I can answer that question very comfortably. Most people, it would be a tremendously uncomfortable answer, or they would just attempt to lie to themselves and everyone else. How much personal effort and sacrifice have you made to truly change yourself and others for the better, and to leave the earth in a better state and in a better condition in which you entered it? Most people don't have a good answer for that. And you know what? That's the answer you're going to have to give to the Creator. And most people are going to be tragically disappointed with that outcome. They're going to judge themselves for the worse. They're not going to have to worry about what creation or the universe does to them. They're actually really going to have to worry in some future state after they leave the body how poorly disappointed they are in their own performance, quite frankly. And some people are, and some people have no shame about it. And we're going to talk about shame as well. And folks, you know what? We may not have to do the Q&A. This might go until 10 or later. It's going to go as long as I need to explain the concepts to my satisfaction. So, self-improvement often means outgrowing your peer group. This is another reason people don't want to engage in and conduct shadow work, is because they know at an intuitive level that their friends are just going to melt away, because it could be a lonely life path. To truly improve oneself often means that others will perceive the ways that you have changed, yet not understand them because they have not undergone such life changes themselves. So they'll see that you've changed, not understand how you've changed and how it's for the better. They haven't done any of that work, and so they'll be in a state of, oh, they're not how they used to be. They're not fun like they used to be, and they'll mock and ridicule and deride. But really, you've left them in the dust and become much better than they are as a being. This can lead to the experience of being socially ostracized by one's former peer group, which can be very emotionally traumatizing. This is one of the main reasons that people fear shadow work so much and are often very hesitant to begin the journey to self-improvement, because they're too worried about what other people think of them, their peer group. Guess what, folks? People like that were never your friends to begin with. Hate to burst your bubble or break the news to you, but they were never your friends. They were never your family members. They were never people who cared about you. All they were people that happened to be around you physically, and they're not very good people. And you should leave people like that in the dust and move on to other peers and people that you could consider your real family. Because people who act like that, they're not your friends and they're not your family. They're bad people who don't really care about self-improvement or the human condition. And I'll say it like that. I'll say it right to people like that. Here's one of the big lessons that people don't want to learn because it's so painful and traumatizing when it comes to their parents or their teachers or their clergy or whatever. Parents and teachers and other types of influencers often teach us to completely miss the target. They teach us don't hit the bullseye, miss, because we're sad, incompetent people and we miss all the time, and we want to teach you to miss because we don't want to look at you as an example who's way up here while we remain way down here. And you know what that is? That's trashiness. That means that the person's not really good, they're trashy. They're basically a piece of scum. And we shouldn't put people like that up on a pedestal. We shouldn't glorify them. We shouldn't say, oh, they did the best they could. No, they didn't. They didn't do the best they could. Never did. Never tried to do the best they could. Not once. Generally. Okay? I'm not saying there's no exceptions to that, but in general, it's true. Most people's parents taught us to miss the mark. Their teachers, their clergy, their family members, their friends, they want them remaining down in mediocrity where they're at, because once they elevate their consciousness and their behavior up here, it makes them feel like shit even more about themselves, and they're already kind of pretty big pieces of shit. Shadow work can lead us to the painful truth that the people who we most believe were here to help us, like parents and teachers, were the very people who have been teaching us to miss the target, not to self-actualize and reach our true and highest potential the entire time. This can be one of the most traumatizing and painful aspects of all within the work of self-improvement. Let me tell you, it's not fun. It's painful, okay? It is not pleasant. When you realize the people that you thought were there, who loved you and who were there to help you the whole time, were basically holding you back or setting bad examples for you to follow, that's very traumatizing. And you have to work through that in the shadow work process, which is why I'm bringing it up as a concept to understand before even going in to the methods and practice. This is one of the most necessary dynamics to face when we explore the reasons for our current situation and our current conditions. So stop making excuses for bad parenting and bad peer advice of any kind, whether it comes from parents, teachers, clergy, friends, family members, co-workers, whatever. We have to stop making excuses for others and how they have contributed to holding our spiritual and psychological work back. They're acting as tethers, they're acting as chains, they're acting as weights. One of the very worst things that we can ever do when approaching shadow work is to start making endless excuses for bad advice and bad influence that has been given to us by people in our lives who we love or respect. And you could still love or respect those people, that's your choice, but stop making excuses for the incorrect influence and bad influence that they've conducted upon you and others. And you know, this is done by people we claim to love and respect, like parents, friends, peers, teachers, clergy, etc. We need to deeply understand that those people may have given us advice and information from their level of awareness. But that does not mean that that advice was true or even good in any way. It could have been completely false, misleading, sending us down a bad pathway in life. So you don't make excuses and say, oh, they did the best they could. They gave information from their current level of awareness, and their current level of awareness is way down here. It's not up here. It's not good quality of information. It doesn't mean you have to start hating them or want to go stab them or something. It's just you can't put them up on a pedestal and say, oh, they're so good because they did the best they could and they were just my family or friends or clergy or whatever. You got to call a spade, ladies and gentlemen. You got to say, they didn't do right by me. This was bad advice. This was bad influence. These people didn't do their best. They failed miserably, often at the one and only job they had ever in life. And that doesn't mean you can't still care about them. But you gotta call it what it is. You can't lie about it and you can't make excuses about it, or you're not going to make it very far in healing through shadow work. We must see this condition, these dynamics, for what they are, and not just place people up on a pedestal just because they were the people who were around us earlier in our lives. That's a very painful lesson. Get as offended as you like. It's still true. What's up there is still the case. It's still objectively true. You can feel about it however the fuck you want. It's never going to make it untrue. And you could keep denying it, and all that's going to do is act as a further noose around your neck. It's going to act as a further leash. So you want to stay where you're at? You don't really want to improve? Keep believing that these people had your best interest in mind when they were the ones who were influencing you in the worst ways imaginable. One of the things you cannot do, no matter how bad the outlook looks in shadow work, is dwell in shame. As soon as you start dwelling in shame, and that becomes an endless feedback loop and a cycle that is very difficult to break out of, you're one step away from physical death. You're one step away from spiritual death. Shame is the lowest form of consciousness that exists that a human being is capable of expressing above death. It's literally below every other form of consciousness listed here on this scale of consciousness that was come up with by the researcher. I believe his name is David Hawkins. So this shows you the states of consciousness and how you enter into either expanded or contracted consciousness. Expanded consciousness really begins with courage. And the things that can help us get there are anger and pride. At least when we're prideful enough that we don't want to be treated like a slave anymore, we become angry about that and we develop the courage to do something about that condition. So even things like anger and pride are not necessarily bad emotional states. They're stepping stone states to higher consciousness. This is where shame dwells on this consciousness scale, right there. The lowest possible before unconsciousness or death. Or at least physical unconsciousness in the state that we refer to as death. I don't think there's any complete cessation of consciousness. I don't see death that way. But while we are incarnated in a physical body, shame is the lowest consciousness before you leave the vessel. Let's put it that way. Shame is the lowest form of consciousness a human being can experience while being physically alive. Shame means dwelling in negativity because one knows consciously that they did not do the right thing when they had the opportunity. I would like to repeat that definition because it's ultra, ultra important. And this is where I'm telling you cannot stay. If you're going to do real shadow work and real self-improvement, you cannot stay in this consciousness that I'm referring to here. Shame means dwelling in negativity in your mind because you know consciously that you didn't do the right thing when you had the opportunity. You can recognize that, you can acknowledge that, but you can't stay there. If you stay there, you're staying in a state that is just barely physically alive above death. Okay? That's not going to help you or anyone else. Shadow work helps us to understand and acknowledge the reasons we may feel shame, but to work toward not staying in that state by making necessary adjustments to our current behavior. That's the whole purpose of shadow work, is to get out of these low vibratory states of consciousness. And again, folks, I struggle with it sometimes myself because I'm not perfect. There is no person who exists in a state of perfection regarding this. All you do is you try every day. That's the whole goal, is to try. That's the Rosicrucian credo. Try. That's it. Try your hardest. Make the effort. Even if self-improvement toward the positive is very slow, you can't remain in feelings of shame. You have to continue to try to improve. Okay? So you don't give up, and you definitely don't stay in shame. You pick yourself up, you dust yourself off, you move forward. We need a reevaluation of self-worth and self-respect. And this is like during and even prior to the shadow work process. You have to try to begin to develop true self-respect. You have to grow your sense of self-worth. You're a unique expression of consciousness. You're not just whoever, just some, like I said, some schlub trying to be average in life. You have to aspire to attain self-actualization, your highest potential. Shadow work helps us to understand that our true self-worth is infinite. This is one of the core principles of Jeremy Locke's magnum opus, The End of All Evil book. He tells us that the value of the individual, you cannot have a value placed upon it because it is infinite. There's no telling what the potential of the individual is. You can't put any kind of a price tag or value label on that. It's infinity. That's what a life is worth. The control system currently operating in our world teaches us to always view ourselves as less than. And guess what? The controllers don't even need to do that as much, because you know who's doing that? Parents, teachers, friends, family members, so-called, all of those things. Wrap them in a healthy double quote dose, because they're not really parents, they're not really teachers, they're not really friends, they're not really family, they're not really clergy. Go on and on and on. They're not our friends or even people we really should be considering good associates with. They're people who have set the bar ultra fucking low in their own lives, and they're trying to keep you down in that state of mediocrity and degradation with them. But believe me, the occult controllers really want to make us feel less than, so that we feel helpless to fight against tyranny and enslavement. Engaging in the dynamic of true self-respect literally means that we take another look at ourselves and reevaluate our self-worth in the world. The word respect actually comes from Latin. Re means again, and spectare, the verb, means to look at or to view. So that's why I put a picture of a woman staring into a mirror at herself, because to engage in the dynamic of true self-respect and the reevaluation of true self-worth is to take another look at who we are. This reevaluation of ourselves allows us to stop seeing ourselves as powerless. We're incredibly powerful. We are not powerless. It shows us how to see our highest potential as a being and how to pursue that potential in the service of truth and freedom. That's what real self-evaluation of our self-worth and the building up of our true self-respect is. And that's indispensable in shadow work, in preparation and in methodology and practice. Spiritual warfare requires true spiritual warriors. Shadow work is about building spiritual warriors. And if I read this warrior ethos, I'll probably break down in tears, but I'm going to endeavor to read it. I'm going to read this ethos, what a warrior is in life. This is sitting here in my office right over here, an actual physical copy of it. I am a warrior. I do my duty. I serve a cause greater than myself. I am accountable to my community and my family for my actions. I blame no one for my faults, and I give thanks for my abilities. I am governed by natural law. My mind is my most powerful weapon. Amen. I train to oppose evil in all of its forms. I will never quit, retreat, or cower in the face of the enemy. I protect the weak. I assist the elderly. I care for those in need. I strive for perfection, realizing we're not going to actually reach a state of perfection, but we strive for it. And I ask the same from those who serve with me. Strive, try, do your best. I lead by example, and I have the highest moral standard. The truth is my constant companion. When the end comes, I will sing my warrior song and go to my reward with honor and dignity. I am a warrior. You fucking better believe it. You better believe I am. And that's the emotion that it brings up in me, because people don't even understand that at all, because they've never lived it for a second of their lives. And then they'll say crazy things like, I don't want to be a warrior. That's the greatest attainment of human potential that you could ever aspire to. And I don't mean just physical battle. I'm talking about a warrior for the truth and a warrior for what is right and a warrior for good. Most people don't have that in their lives at all. That's why I wake up thankful. I wake up thankful for that. I wake up horribly depressed because most people don't have that. We are actively involved in a spiritual war on this planet. The stakes of this war are our freedom and our very lives. These statements are definitively true, and it does not matter at all if you don't want that to be the case. We're in a spiritual war. To defeat the enemy that is enslaving and destroying us, we must rise up to meet the requirements of this spiritual war, of this spiritual battle. We will not win unless we meet the requirements for victory. And shadow work will show us what those requirements are and help us to build ourselves up to meet those requirements. Shadow work shows us these requirements within ourselves. It teaches us how to shed our fears and become spiritual warriors who can meet these requirements for true freedom. It shows us the means to rise to this challenge and the means to defeat the enemies that lie within ourselves. That's where the real enemy lies. People want to look external, outside of themselves for enemies. And yeah, there's plenty of enemies there too. But let me tell you where the worst enemies lie. The worst enemies lie inside of ourselves. And that's what has to be defeated, because before we can ever hope to defeat the external enemies, you got to defeat the enemies within. Going back to what we already talked about when we talked about the work, we are a microcosm of the macrocosm. Our individual expression of consciousness is a reflection of our current condition and of the whole universe. One of the ultimate goals of shadow work is to show the practitioner how they are a unique form of consciousness with infinite value and a critical life purpose. Shadow work shows us that we are here to learn and grow, to improve ourselves and our world, and to make a difference in the spiritual war that is before us. When we realize these truths, we will step into our rightful place in the will of creation. Once we commit to our true purpose, universal forces support our efforts and will come to our assistance in innumerable ways. You will see this happen in your own life once you make that dedication and commitment to be a spiritual warrior in this battle. Most people are not. They're wishy-washy. They're weak. They're sitting back with their thumb up their rear end, waiting for something to happen and watching it like it's some TV show, like it's some passive thing that you watch on a screen. That's not what life is, folks. You have to become engaged. You have to become a warrior. You have to get on the spiritual battlefield, and you got to meet the requirements for freedom. It doesn't just magically happen. All right, so we're going into part 2 of the whole presentation, methods and practice. This is where the actual methodologies of shadow work come into play, and it's where practicing them over periods of time to improve them and to make them as good as they can be, where we're going to look at some of those dynamics and ways of doing those things. So let's jump into this section.